Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to you all. From those down the road to the folks around the world. Welcome back to another video, looking today at the Canterbury Tales, written by Geoffrey Chaucer in the late 14th century. Because the tales are quite a long prose of written work, this is going to be a two-part video, taking quotes, lines, and general markers from Chaucer's seminal work and placing them within the real world, the real life locations that would have been mentioned by Chaucer. So without going too further and too rambling, let's start where any good story begins, with the prologue. When in April the sweet showers fall, and pierce the drought of March to the root, and all the veins are bathed in liquor of such power as brings about the engendering of the flower, when also Zephyrus with his sweet breath exhales an air in every grove and heath, upon the tender shoots and the young sun his half course in the sign of the ram has run, and the small fowl are making melody that sleep away the night with open eye. So nature pricks them and their heart engages, then people long to go on pilgrimages, and palmers long to seek the stranger strands of far-off saints hollowed in sun-dry lands. And especially from every shire's end of England down to Canterbury they wend, to seek the holy blissful martyr quick, to give his help to them when they were sick. It happened in that season that one day in Southwark at the Tabard, as I lay, ready to go on pilgrimage and start for Canterbury, most devout at heart. Now, the first few lines and verses of the prologue basically go through all of the context. What month of the year it is, what season it is, and even going so far as to say which constellations are in the night sky and what positions they find themselves in. The narrator, believed to be Geoffrey Chaucer himself, tells us the start point of this pilgrimage before then introducing each and individual characters who will be telling their short stories, their tales along the way. Because that's what the Canterbury Tales is. It's a series of short stories in a collection told within a wider narrative of pilgrimage, sprinkled in with a little bit of competitive nature, because it is said that whoever tells the best story will be given a free dinner upon their return from pilgrimage. The narrator is also regarded as one of the characters within these Canterbury Tales, so he does interact with the other pilgrims around him. But he does not referee this storytelling competition, for in fact that was somebody known as the host, who was one of the innkeepers to our first real-life location of our Canterbury Tales, the Tabard Inn in the London borough of Southwark. The only reference to the Tabard Inn today is a small blue plaque marking the location of where it used to sit. Because of the developments of London since the Second World War, as well as in the industrial periods of the 18th and 19th centuries, a lot of old London as it was in the medieval period and during the time of Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, doesn't really exist in a lot of fragments today. You have Southwark Cathedral, which has stood there for many, many centuries, but it wasn't referred to as a cathedral back then, and in fact is not at all mentioned within Geoffrey Chaucer's work. The Tabard Inn has been replaced today by a dental practice down a small little alleyway just 5 minutes round the corner from the present-day Southwark Cathedral and London Bridge train station, as well as the massive shard that sits along the London skyline. But looking back to London in the late 14th century, it would have been very different. It was a lot less urbanised. In fact, the entire population consisted of only 40,000 people. And being an inn, well, we're not considering it to be a country pub inn that we might see on the rolling hills of the countrysides of England. No, it was in fact the cheapest form of accommodation one could afford, a type of hostel, in fact. And being in this borough of Southwark, it was considered one of the dodgiest areas of London town, because these inns, these hostels, were regarded as the Southwark stews, not because of their good cooking, but because of their reputation as a form of brothel as well, often ran by migrants, Flemish migrants, from places in modern-day Belgium, northern France, and southern portions of the Netherlands. Now that we've introduced the Tabard Inn, as well as the month, the date, and the time of year that our story is set, let us go now into London itself and pick up our story of the Canterbury Tales prologue. Early next morning, at the spring of day, up rose our host and roused us like a cock, gathering us in a flock, and off we rode at slightly faster pace, then walking to St. Thomas's watering place. Just a short distance from the Tabard Inn, the Pilgrims would have made their way along what was known as Watling Street, the old Roman road that leads from London to Canterbury. It was then called Kent Street and is now known as the Tabard Road, in lieu of Beckett's Canterbury Tales. I've come to a small park that's just adjacent to our next stop of Canterbury Tales. This building here is said to have been the St. Thomas's watering hole that is mentioned by Geoffrey Chaucer. It is now a Vietnamese bar and restaurant, and just alongside this old watering hole is Albany Street, which used to be a stream running through the point of the edge of London. And just across the road, at what is now a local Tesco supermarket, is where the position at which the Pilgrims drew lots and decided to which Pilgrim was going to tell the first tale. In fact, it was the Knight's Tale who went first. Now, moving back into this home space of mine, we can now move into the main bulk of these Canterbury Tales. Following the Miller's Tale, the host presses the character known as the Reeve to tell his own tale. But in amongst this, also exclaims to the rest of the group, "Why look, here's Deptford, and it's 9 o'clock. And Greenwich too." Now, considering our powers and detective skills, being only 9 o'clock, and in these areas of Deptford and Greenwich quite close, seemingly, to the city of London itself, well, we can understand that the upcoming Reeve's Tale, the previous Miller's Tale, and the Knight's Tale, which kicked off the whole pilgrimage itself, have to be the first 3 tales within this literary work. In the modern day, the London limit consists of anything within the M25, this sort of circular motorway, highway that encompasses, well, London in a big circle, with the City of London, the very central point, being all the big skyscrapers, all the banks, the Bank of England, and of course the seat of power, Houses of Parliament and Downing Street. But in the late 14th century, the London city limits and the expansive area around it only went as far as a place which is now called North Peckham, which is only a short distance from St Thomas's watering hole, which I mentioned obviously earlier, and coincidentally has a large mural on one of its old civic centres that chronicles the City of London's history from its founding in the Roman period right up until sort of the Second World War, and interestingly enough has a small little section dedicated to Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Moving now slightly ahead, we find ourselves at the beginning of what we call Group B. So let's have a look at the first dozen or so lines of this particular portion. Our host perceived the sun upon its arc of artificial day from dusk to dark, quarter way up, and plus a half hour more, and though not deeply versed in heavenly lore, he knew quite well it was the 18th day of April, that is the messenger to May, and was aware the shadow of every tree was of the same extent and quantity, as erected body casting it, so by the shadow cast he had the wit to judge that Phobos, shining clear and bright, had climbed 45 degrees in height. So for that day and in that latitude it must be 10 o'clock, or that concludes. Now, with our thinking caps on and our powers of investigation once again, we can start to unpick a little bit more about the context within these lines and verses of the Canterbury Tales. We already knew that we were in the month of April. We were told that in the prologue. But the host gives a small specific detail. It is the 18th day of the month of April. But if we did compare back to the lines at the very beginning of our prologue, the prologue told us that we were halfway through the sign of the ram, i.e. the astrological sign of Aries. The 18th day of April is actually the second to last day within Aries. So this doesn't quite add up. Is it the 18th day, or is it only part way through the month of April? It could be suggested that with the ever-progressing nature of time over the last 600 or so years, and the ever-expanding nature of the galaxy and the universe around us, the night sky may have looked slightly different 600 years ago. Our earthly perception may look at the night sky and looked at the night sky 600 years ago and seen something fairly similar. Because the universe expands, we see it moving very, very, very slowly. So the month of Aries in the astrological calendar may be the 18th of April at the end, but it may have been 600 years ago more towards the middle. So perhaps Chaucer isn't wrong, it's just a different perception of the night sky and the universe around us. Looking further still into the sky, people had been telling the time for hundreds, if not thousands of years by using the position of the sun as it moves over a 180-degree mark across the landscape. We see that the sun is at the 45-degree mark. So that is about a quarter of the way across. A quarter of the day, having gone already in the 18th day of April, would place the time at 10 o'clock. Which is good, because at the end of this verse, the host concludes that it is about 10 o'clock in the morning on the 18th day of April. For thousands of years, people have been trying to tell the time. What time of day it is, when to plant the seeds, when to go anywhere, and when will it get dark. For the last few hundred years, here at Greenwich, at the Royal Observatory, they've been doing just that. But in the late 14th century, at the time of Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, well, there weren't really that many clocks in England or throughout Europe. Only a small number of cathedrals actually had a mechanical time-telling device, which was, well, semi-accurate. As we move towards the end of Group B and the end of this Part 1 video, the host asks the monk to tell his story, proclaiming, "Why look, we've almost got to Rochester." Rochester is another major city which had its own cathedral. In fact, in 1201, one particular pilgrim by the name of William of Perth, a Scottish baker in fact, had travelled all the way from his hometown in Perth and had arrived in Rochester. As soon as he left the city, unfortunately, he was murdered by a bunch of bandits. So William of Perth became a saint and is often associated with Rochester and Rochester Cathedral, where he is buried. So not only would this been a pilgrimage stop for those weary travellers along the way, it would be its own site of pilgrimage significance. And with that, we come to the conclusion of this Part 1 video. I hope you've all enjoyed it, and I hope that you return for Part 2, when we complete our pilgrimage towards Canterbury, as well as completing the Canterbury Tales. But until then, have a great day, and see you in the next video.